type loud. Okay. I think we're good to go. Alright, I think... crap. You really type loud. Alright. Hello, hello.
Hey.
Alright, there you are. Let me just actually see. Alright, so we're gonna send out, it's gonna send out the notifications that we're going, and we shall be recording. And okay. Hello, everybody. Okay, and we are indeed live. Cool. I can open my notes. No, when you do two of these and like back to back. All right. Keep notes. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, Squad Squad, and welcome to Slav Guns, more specifically, Slav Stream number 5. Now, first and foremost, I want to apologize. This was supposed to be number 4, but we did number 4 yesterday when we had breaking news that American Outdoor Brands, the parent company of Smith & Wesson, they're going to be spinning off Smith & Wesson from all the other brands such as Caldwell and Crimson Trace, and they're going to do 2 separate companies. So that's going to happen later in 2020. So I went into detail on that. I don't have an article about that yet, but make sure that you viewed the stream number 4, which was just yesterday, and I'll throw it up in the comments and the description so you can access it later. But today we have the stream that I was really excited about. I was looking forward to for a while, and we are going to be joined by Alex, who is the creator of Affordable Optics and Rifle Reviews. It's a big, nice YouTube channel, and I love this guy for the level of detail that he goes into optics, and he did carve out himself a little bit of a niche. Unfortunately, I only have my coffee with me. Otherwise, I think I might be insulting because I don't have brie and crackers. He's that type of a guy. So let me bring on Alex, and we do that. All right. Alex, hello, hello.
Hey there, how's it going?
Well, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here, Slav.
It's okay, you can call me by my real name. You know it now.
I wasn't sure if you were out with your people yet, so I was
There
gonna
you
let
go.
you do that.
So, since you are from our 51st state, we got to ask the question, how cold is it, and is there snow and polar bears outside?
Give me a second. It is. Actually, it's not bad. It's 0 degrees Celsius, which in American I have no idea what that
It's
is, but
32. It's still cold.
it's cold, all right. I went hunting this afternoon, and I was freezing.
Okay.
Yep.
Now,
There's
you
about
you released a video earlier today. You didn't film it today, right?
Oh God, no, no.
Okay.
That actually video took about 3 days to load with the new YouTube beta model, which is terrible. Yeah, that was done about a week ago. Yeah,
Yeah, because I
yeah.
think
And today there's about. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say there's a lot of people who are having issues with uploads yesterday. So I know that was kind of like we had our stream and then there's a video, and I was gonna do the video first and then the stream. So I changed the timeline, then I had to change it back because like I said, there's absolutely everyone was having issues uploading videos, including our friend Joe, who joined us on our last week's live stream. So I guess it wasn't just you.
Oh, okay.
There were YouTube issues, so for once it wasn't you. All
Yeah.
right, so since you are Canadian, one of the things we talked about last week, and I just wanted to touch upon it again, if you're not familiar, there was a story of a Canadian who's in Winnipeg, and he made the mistake of ordering suppressors from China on Wish.com, and he got raided, and then they found a whole bunch of 73 guns, including fully auto guns, subguns, belt feds, and regular machine guns. So AK-47s, Finnish M44 submachine guns, Sterling subguns, PS90s, a couple of suppressors, Thompson submachine guns, a BAR, a
There's a
Mac.
Bren.
There's a brand, a Mac 11, uh, Tech 22, a Glock 18, which is really interesting. Either it really was an actual Glock 18 or it was a Glock 17 that he went and he bought the auto selector on Wish.com. So he had all of these guns. How can you even get those in Canada? My understanding is machine guns are illegal.
Okay, so machine guns, as provided you, let's say your great grandfather had a machine gun. I think it was before 19. Well, so I want to say before the 60s or 1987 or somewhere in 1960s. Now, if your grandfather had one at that point, they were prohibited, which it was a class of firearms, meaning he could keep it, but it could never leave his safe.
Okay.
That's it. You would own it, but it would never go anywhere. If you died, and let's say you could allow your son to inherit it, that's the prohibited class. So there's no way of buying your way in. It's not possible. That's one thing. Now, so that's as far as getting them legally. Now,
Okay.
getting them illegally from Wish, I mean that little thing that you put on the back of the Glock, which I honestly wasn't sure if that little block was meant for an airsoft pistol or the actual thing. I was kind of like, I wonder if it actually works. And I mean, from
It
Wish,
does.
there's really no barriers. You press buy now and it ships right to your address. Same thing with the suppressor, or should we call it an oil filter? Because I mean, that's what it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. I just want to get clarification on that because I mean, well, us Americans, we only concern ourselves with the lower 50. I'm sorry, lower
Yeah.
48. Alaska's Russia, and Hawaii is its own little world. All right. So speaking of Wish.com, and Chinese gun parts and optics, it seems for anyone who hasn't been watching your channel, it seems like you really carved yourself out a niche covering Chinese optics, both fake replicas and optics from relatively unknown Chinese brands. So, for those who don't already know you, for my viewers, and even yours, can you talk about how you got started with YouTube? Tell us about yourself and how this whole passion around affordable optics came to be.
Yeah, so I started this because I'm really cheap to begin with. Now, I bought a rifle. What was my first rifle? I think it was a Ruger 1022. And then, I'm not the type that wants to spend even $250 on a scope. At least that was in my early days of buying scopes and such. So I was thinking, I wonder if I can get by with just, a $30 or $50 scope from
Nope.
eBay or Amazon or Wish. Well, more eBay, which was principally where I was looking. And I think I started with red dots and such, and that's kind of where I started it, and partially why. I had the assumption that some scopes, which are branded in Canada, or sorry, the US as well, are in fact the same ones you find on eBay without any brands on them, which on certain scopes, I do believe that is the case to this day, because I mean, if you look at some of the big brand scopes that they're selling for really cheap, and then you see the same thing that just without the brand on eBay, which is, I don't know, about 20% cheaper, do you really think the big brand's going to take the time to manufacture their own just for that price? No, I personally think for certain models, they're just okay. We're buying 6 crates of these scopes. Let's put some stickers on it, boys, and sell it for 30% more,
No,
or in certain cases, 300% more.
yeah. No, I mean, you make a very awesome point about that, particularly. It's often one of the things I wondered myself. And you take a look at, so I cover the finance world out of it, and a lot of the viewers know me from my coverage of the firearms industry. And one of the things that we look at is Vista Outdoors, which is the parent company of Federal, Spear Ammo, and one of the companies that they have is Bushnell. So Bushnell is one of those companies that they have a lot of really good scopes and they have a lot of crappy scopes. And a lot of scopes in the middle as well. But one of the things is some of those scopes, I mean, they get produced overseas. So oftentimes we'll see scopes that are made in China, made in the Philippines, I believe Vietnam, Japan is really good, and then some are made in the States. And I guess what really hit me, so a couple of days ago, I was browsing Amazon and I found a pair of binoculars, which seemed like a really good deal. I got them, they came next day. I take them out to the range. I'm like, wow, these are actually pretty good. That evening, I went into Walmart, just browsing the discount ammo aisle now that they have the assault barrel ammos on clearance at Walmart. So go visit them, get some now. But I was looking, I was like, wait, that pair of binoculars looks really, really interesting. And like, it looks very familiar. And I'm like, looking, I'm like, I take a picture, I go on Amazon on my phone, I'm like, they're almost identical. So I reached out to the company that was selling them on Amazon. I'm like, hey, your binoculars look really familiar. His response was, oh, I'm glad that you actually noticed. Our binoculars are made in the same factory as Bushnell and Vortex. And I could look at them like, oh my god, there's actually so many of them. And there are, so I'm like, okay, well, is it all the exact same parts? And I think that's kind of like the point that you're getting to. And I think the answer to that is, well, actually, I know the answer to that is. So, in some cases, it's literally the exact same optics that are just rebranded with an American name or a brand that we know. And in other cases, there are indeed differences. And I guess we can talk about it now or later, but it really came to be about quality control. And sometimes they do use better quality glass or coatings in the brands made, for example, for like Vortex. But no, I mean, it's that train of thought.
Yeah.
So we're talking about that. Okay. So one of the things that I must admit I love about your channel is the level of detail that you go into optics reviews. So I've generally done them myself in the past, and it's like, okay, I either like it or not, and I'll do some of the tests, but you take it to the extreme, and what I love is that you go through a very detail-oriented process. For those that haven't watched your channel, share it with us.
All right, so the reason why I did it to such level is, I mean, when I started reviewing optics, especially scopes, red dots, I mean, not so much, it's really not my specialty, is that there was no real consistency. And the things that I wanted to know, because I mean, I was new to the sport, is like, there's a lot of things that you're not answering, or sorry, not you, but like a lot of other reviewers are not answering. I want to know, okay, well, how do the turrets feel? One guy says, well, they feel pretty good. Well, what does that mean? What is pretty good? How about how much internal adjustment is there? Can it survive a box test? How about how fat that reticle is?
Yeah.
I did a review on it was a No, it wasn't a Vortex. It was a Bushnell, the AR series, the 4.5 to 18 by 50, I believe. And I was appalled by how thick the reticle was. Now, I mean, some people like it. I think they're blind, but some people also hate it. If you watch the review, I mean, the proof is in there, which is what I wanted in every bit of my reviews, is that if I'm going to say something, you know, the reticle sucks, it's so fat, I could show you on something representational, be like, see, this reticle covers this mailbox out there. I mean, what part of the animal are you shooting? Hopefully somewhere in the middle, right? So, I mean, that's partially why. And I mean, a lot of the time on the websites, they don't always indicate, well, how much internal adjustment is there? Specifically for the Chinese manufacturer optics, they just don't mention it. So that was something I wanted to make sure that was clear in my videos. And then I started to follow a pattern. Well, I developed the pattern really. In the beginning, there wasn't really a pattern. And then I just decided, okay, these are the key points that I feel are necessary for reviews. Can it serve, is it accurate? I mean, like accuracy. It's more like, can it hold zero in that aspect? And then there's recoil, the glass quality, which represented through a GoPro, I mean, you're never really going to see how clear it is. And how nice is it outside is going to affect the outcome of the glass clarity video. So some of it's, you know, it's what I say as well. the focus parallax, if that is smooth, if there's any slop, if it's too tight to move by hand easily. What else? Eye relief. That's something, you know what? How much do you move between the highest magnification and the lowest? That's something you notice on much higher end optics has very little change. I'm looking at a Styrka S7 2.5 to 15 by 50, and this one retails for about, I think it's 750 US. And the variation between on the lowest magnification of 2.5 and the highest being a 15, the eye relief was about, I think, a quarter inch, which is kind of amazing. Usually it varies by about 3 inches. Sorry, not 3 inches, but a bit more than that. And I mean, it's something that you notice on a little higher end. The more you pay, the more the details kind of get perfected.
Now,
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to make sure is represented in all my videos. So there would be a reliable source, that covers pretty much everything.
so one of the questions that I always had about them, your rating, so you grade them on a scale of 5, is that in relation to its price, or is that just in general? So, for instance, like optics quality.
So the ratings are based on the price point, because I mean, you can say the turrets, they feel sloppy, but is that good for a $50 scope? In that case, I would have to say yes. If it was on a, I don't know, $800 scope, that would be a one, or something similar. So it's pretty much all based on the price point, with the exception of a few things. I mean, recoil. If it didn't survive recoil, well, it either passes or it fails. So I mean, it's not really much of a 5 out of 5. It's just it either passes or it doesn't. Um, for eye relief, I'm not necessarily as picky. Let's say with the O Hunt that I just finished review on, the 4.5 to 18 by 44 first focal plane, it's like 150 bucks US. It's first focal plane at that price, and the eye relief was 3 inches at the highest magnification and 3.7 at its lowest. Which, I mean, for that price, I mean, what do you expect? You're not getting anything better from Bushnell, that's for sure. So, in my perspective, I gave that a 3 out of 5, and I'm thinking maybe I was being a little bit cheap.
Okay.
Maybe, but I have seen other $150 scopes from eBay, from Wish, that had 3.7 and 4 inches of eye relief.
Wow.
So it can be done.
So, speaking of cheap, since you just brought that word up, um, what was the question? Sorry about that. Okay. So we have cheap, we have mid-priced, and expensive optics. Does that, or at least in your experience, has that translated into good or bad?
I mean, that really all depends on what you're doing. So, I mean, cheap can do great on a 22 long rifle. I mean, that's really what I started doing is like the 3 to 9 by 40. It's the $30 optic on eBay. That's perfect for a little Ruger 1022. The recoil is pretty soft, and that thing will last pretty much forever. I had one just like that, and I think I put about a couple thousand rounds on it through in my Savage 64F, and it did great. It never had an issue until I put it on an SKS, and then it died. So I mean, is it good? Yes, it's good for certain things, but it's terrible for other things. So you're not going on your $2,000 hunt with the $30 optic. That's just plain stupid.
Yeah.
If you're going, I don't know, going for some squirrels and just for some fun plinking, then it's great.
Now, when you're buying the optics, or you're going, let's say, for example, you're going to go on Amazon, or you're going to go on eBay, do you generally find that the features and the specs that they list on there are going to correlate to what it actually is?
So, I mean, a lot of the time, the specs that they list on the website, usually the amount of internal adjustment is non-existent.
Hmm.
Most cases, the magnification is correct. If you guys have seen my 10 by 40 by 50, was it Firewolf? It was a Firewolf scope. Essentially, you type Firewolf in eBay, 10 to 40 by 50, and that is a misrepresentation, a gross misrepresentation of the magnification of an optic. That one was about $120 Canadian, actually. And I only figured it out as I was doing the final editing of that video that, holy crap, this isn't a 10 by 40. I was trying to do a glass comparison between a Discovery and that one, and then I realized the objects are the same size at the highest magnification. So the Firewolf at 40 was the same size as the Discovery at 25. And I was like, well, I'll be damned. So I had to refilm my whole end portion of the videos. But in general, the specs, they do represent correctly. I mean, they don't always list the amount of internal adjustment, which, I mean, if you're going for a cheap optic on eBay, they generally have about 50. And the magnification is generally correct. So in that aspect, yes, they are pretty much correct. The eye relief is usually what they say.
Now, how correct are the turret labelings?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I skipped ahead a little bit here, but I was like, this morning I wake up, I'm like, ooh, Alex released a new video. I'm like, let me go watch this. And then there's like a really awesome bombshell.
Yeah, I mentioned that right in the beginning. I was gonna save it for the end, but I'm like, you know what? I'll just throw you guys a bone right as I start this review. You know, I was doing the box test. I have this little rig I have set up in my backyard with bricks on it, so it doesn't move at all when I do a box test. And I'm going up to the number 3, which, I mean, it's in mils on this turret, and that should be exactly at the 3 mils line on my paper in the background. However, it was somewhere between, I guess, 6/10ths of the distance, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. My target's always at the same distance. This should be there. And then I was wondering, well, what could I be doing wrong? Then I'm thinking, is it a second focal plane? I'm like, no, it's not. It's obviously a first. I double checked that. Yes, obviously it's a first. What was I thinking? And then I realized I counted the amount of clicks until I got to the right point, and I did 40 clicks. So 40 at 50 meters distance is equivalent to 10 MOA at 100 yards. Anyway, I did the math, and 40 clicks means this is an MOA. So it's not in mils, it's an MOA. But that is the first time I've ever seen that on any Chinese manufacturer optic, any optic at all. I mean, I'm guessing maybe the guy over at Ohunt, you know, he put the wrong turret on when they shipped it out. I don't.
Or, or do we know the difference between mils and MOA? Or I guess, what was it? Was it advertised as like 1/10 mil, or what was it?
Okay, so on the website they say it has 50 MOAs worth of internal adjustment,
Okay.
but they said the units of measurement in it are in mils. So I'm thinking, what? You should be representing the amount of internal adjustment in mils and also have the units of the clicks in mils as well. But that wasn't the case in this one scenario. I'm assuming they're going to be fixing that when they see my video, because that's a pretty easy fix. You just put a different turret on and you're done. So I'm guessing, like, in the review, it does say that, but likely on the future scopes they're going to be shipping, they're going to have MOA turrets.
Hopefully. But hope is not a strategy. So we talked about the cheaper Chinese no-name brands, or let's call them OEMs for that matter, because I mean a lot of those companies might very well be making optics for your Bushnells, your Vortex, and other companies. Now, what about the optics there that are blatantly copying? So whether like you go on Wish, there's like a bunch of loopholes. You have ACOGs. I've seen EOTechs. I'm sure there's a couple others. And you've tested a couple of those.
Yeah, so I've tested quite a few of those, and honestly, the more I do, the more discouraged I get. It started off really well with was it the ACOG 4 to 32, I believe. Yeah, that was it. And also the ACOG that was non-magnified, just a simple red dot. Those went really, really well. And so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna buy every fake optic out there, and I'm gonna test it just to see, you know what, how good is it? I mean, these aren't comparisons to the real deal, but they look so much alike. I mean, like the ACOGs, a lot of people can't tell the difference, which, I mean, is pretty astonishing. But then again, I'm not sure why anybody would want an ACOG to begin with. It has 2 inches of eye relief. Are you just asking for scope bite? I don't know. Anyway, about the fakes. So I've reviewed the ACOG 4 to 32. I've reviewed the non-magnified version. Those 2 are great. Now, if we start talking about the Trijicon SRS, the Trijicon RMO, what was the other one? There was one more. Oh, the Leupold LCO, which these are all really popular fakes that are found on AliExpress, Wish, and eBay for around, I think it's 100. Actually, no, but for between $60 and $80 Canadian, which is I don't know, 25% less in US. And those were atrocious. They're just terrible. I mean, physically, you couldn't tell the difference. If I gave you one today and gave you the real deal in your other hand, you wouldn't know which one to pick. Now, the easy thing is they generally always come in the same case. But if you're buying used, you won't know this because let's say the seller might not have it in its original box. So he's just selling it like that. So a lot of the
Okay.
time when I'm looking on, let's say, used gun sites for optics to review, I look in the red dot categories and I look for these specific things. If they come in this little plasticky case like mine did, then I know immediately they're fakes. For example, the Leupold VX3i, the 4.5 to 14 by 50, that I have reviewed that fake scope.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. The glass quality was actually phenomenal. The turrets, they felt insanely positive. Although I feel like it's cheap, brittle plastic that just has some really solid clicks to it. That's just my opinion right now. The one key difference is on the box. Your first indication is it says matte, not mate, matte. So as in the color texture. So whenever I've actually found a few on Kijiji, which is I'm not sure if you guys have that in the U.S.
I've never heard of
No,
it, but it's possible.
it's like Craigslist, but it's a really easy website to use for buying used stuff. So I've seen a few of these, and then I see a loophole. I'm like, oh, how much is he asking? And then he's usually asking like about half of the regular price for something about that. So somebody like might be like, wow, that's an insane deal. They're gonna jump on it. Well, really, they're only getting an $80 optic that will work surprisingly, and they'll have fairly good glass. And they may never even know that it's a fake unless they saw the box that says matte, as in the name matte, as opposed to the color texture. So
Now, did that fake loophole, did it actually say made in China on it, or did it say made in the United States?
ooh, no, it said everything like the regular one.
Okay.
Yeah, it did say made and manufactured in the U.S. on it. It had a serial number on the bottom. It had the little gold ring. They really didn't skip any of the fine details. The owner's manual, the warranty forms, actually the scope caps. Well, they weren't scope caps. They were shitty bikini covers, the little rubbery ones.
Mm-hmm.
At least I think they're shitty. It came with those. Now I'm not sure if the real one does come with one similar, um, but I'd have to check. So I personally think those ones are kind of shitty. So I would assume the real one doesn't have shitty little bikini covers on it. Yeah. Other than that, for the fakes, as far as my testing goes, I found a bunch of them to be garbage. So unless you want to buy the fake ACOGs, those ones are fine. But the fake loophole, the fake Trigicon RMR, the fake Trigicon SRS were garbage. I noticed some massive point of impact change with under recoil on a 22 long rifle,
Wow.
just on the was it the Vortex? Come on, the Vortex Razor
Okay.
AMG.
The fake one. Okay.
Yeah, obviously the fake one. I'm shooting and I have my spotter because I'm trying to zero this thing. The clicks aren't very positive. I'm not too sure what a click represents on this fake one because it definitely isn't a quarter MOA or a half. It's just God knows what. And then I'm shooting and then I shoot again. And he's like, "Oh, you're about 16 inches higher," and I'm like, "What the devil?" I check all my scope mounts and everything is tight, and I just couldn't figure it out. And then I'm like, "Wow, this thing is just rattling on the inside." So that was pretty disappointing. Essentially, in general, just avoid all fakes, with the exception of the ACOGs. Those ones, they're pretty decent. And the loophole scope was actually pretty good, but I wouldn't trust it.
Yeah. So it's cool that you bring up the ACOG because from what I saw before, the fake ACOGs were actually not bad. And in chat, we have a question from TKOU272. What about primary arms? And the reason why I bring it up now is the primary arms, if I'm not mistaken, when they first really kind of made the big splash, was for their clones of ACOGs. Um, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was basically the same company that made them for primary arms and is selling fake fakes out there right now.
Yeah. So what I've noticed with even the ACOGs that, let's say on OHUNT, and the fake ones, they generally come in the same box. So I'm pretty sure the same plant is making it for everybody, and then y'all put your own names on it. Or if you buy enough volume, we'll put your name on it for you.
Yeah.
So if you want to call it Slav Guns, don't call it ACOG. You can put Slav Guns on it. You just got to buy probably a couple thousand. And I think primary arms starting off with getting an ACOG style because they can't actually the patent's expired. But
Yes.
anyway, I think they went the really conservative, safe way by doing that because from all the forums online, the ACOG, the fake ACOG, I have not seen anybody say that it's failed or has died. So I was really amazed. I mean, I looked and looked and looked because I did my testing and it did great, but I also want to know how about everybody else? Everybody else who tested must have an experience. They must have
Hmm.
posted it somewhere. And everybody who did buy one, who did make a post, said really good things about it. Other than these stupid eye relief, which is 1.5 inches, which
Yeah.
I don't get it. Why does anybody want an optic with 1.5 inch eye relief?
Yeah. Now here's a question. So I mean, obviously you've tested a lot of scopes, both on the lower end price scale, and you tested some on the higher end ones. The issues that you've had with scopes, well, let me rephrase it, with optics in general, did you find that they came to you messed up, or did they develop the issues while you were testing them?
So I've seen a few optics that had an issue that, well, actually one optic had a point of impact change with magnification. So I gave it a quick twist and the crosshairs would actually kind of jump by about 5 MOA or so. Um, Generally, most of the optics that I have reviewed weren't really defective. They were just some of them lousy in some aspects and had other strong features in other things.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So I guess the must-haves, as long, let's for example, let's say as long as it doesn't change the point of impact with the magnification, assuming that if there's a parallax adjustment, the parallax adjustment works, and the magnification works, and that the turrets move as they're supposed to, and if you ordered mill, they are mill, and if they're MOA, they are MOA indeed, and it passes the box test. Assuming all of that lines up and works, what do you find are the differences between cheap optics, so let's say $50 to $100, entry level, let's say call it 250, mid priced, let's say 500, and higher end optics?
Okay, so on let's say $30 optic, the most common one on eBay, the $30 3 to 9 by 40,
Mm-hmm.
the turrets are they actually feel quite positive. There's no numbers, you can't reset them. That might be a bit of an exception. Everything was fairly smooth, but the glass quality is the bottom of the barrel stuff. Essentially, it's the same quality that you generally see on brand name stuff at about 100 to $150, which is the bottom of the barrel. It doesn't get much worse than that. Now, as you go up around $150, up to $150 in the cheap stuff, well, you're going to notice some very spongy turrets. They do click. They're not, you don't feel the click, but you might hear it, or you might feel it moderately and not hear it. There's definitely going to be certain things that are a little rough around the edges. Maybe the magnification adjustment is really stiff. I've seen that a few times. The parallax adjustment being really stiff. I've even seen once, this was actually pretty weird. This was on a fake Hawk optic, a fake Hawk
Hmm.
sidewinder. I think it was 4.5 to 18 by 44. I actually only found out it was fake because I asked for some specs from Hawk and they told me they didn't make that model ever. So that was interesting. What was actually interesting while I was doing the testing is I would turn the turrets and I was looking through the scope as I would turn it. It was in my fixture, so I had a pretty solid viewing point, and the turrets would kind of move like it would lag. So I was thinking, what? How is this even possible? So imagine like a spongy foam in the bottom filled with kind of molasses, and then you kind of turn a spring to move it. It was kind of as if, I mean, trying to give you a mental representation. It really like, oh, and then I'll move now kind of thing. And I was just like, wow, this is pretty strange. I'm assuming that optic, which I have not finalized the testing, would likely move under recoil until it finally found its resting point. Um, yeah, so that's around $150. I have seen some that had a really positive, some of them were pretty much perfect, but there's always the glass. No matter what, around this price point, the glass is always going to be still borderline bottom of the barrel. Now, not bottom of the barrel, but borderline, kind of one step up. I reviewed the West Hunter WTF, not what the fuck. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why they chose that abbreviation, but it's WTF. It
English
was
is not English is their second language.
Yeah, probably that's the case. And anyway, so with that optic, it was a 56 millimeter objective, and it had a massive fisheye effect at the end.
Okay.
And the glass was actually pretty terrible. I was just staring at a black dot on a pretty bright day. At 100 meters, it was a pretty sharp black dot, and I couldn't tell the outline of the black dot. It kind of looked like a blurry cookie. So I wasn't too sure what that like why it was so cheap and lousy. I contacted them and they told me it was the same as their other 6 to 24 by 50 optic, which is actually quite good.
Okay.
So that's about for the that's how it goes for about the I'd say $80 to about 150 US. That's kind of what you're looking at. They might be good, they might be bad. There are definitely going to be some little details that aren't great. Above that is I really think is where you start to see much better quality. But as far as no name stuff or stuff that gets rebranded far too often, which you see on AliExpress, they pretty much stop their kind of production at that price point. So you don't see too many scopes at about $300 on AliExpress unless they're actually branded. For example, then I think we would need to move up to like Vector Optics or Discovery. Which are you familiar with those brands?
Vector, I've heard of. Discovery, I have not.
Okay, so at that price, I think between $300, well, more like I haven't actually tested their stuff. That's between 200 and actually no, I have. They have the Vector Optics Everest, which I believe is 190 something US. And surprisingly, the turret's not surprising. They were a little bit spongy, fairly audible. The parallax was fine. The magnification was fine. The glass quality was obviously better than the $150 no-name stuff. And the quality control is obviously better on those as well. They had some really good eye relief, but the glass was decent, but not fantastic. Um, and then I think it's where you move up to the 300, 400 is where you really start to see some pretty good quality in optics. I reviewed the Vector Taurus 3 to 18 by 50, which was actually really, really nice. And I think that was, how much was that optic? I have to check. I just finished the review on that one a few weeks ago. Let me just check.
And while you do that, there is a slight issue with. There's a box covering your face, so I'm going to take care of that while you check the price.
Okay. All right, so I got it. So the price for that optic was about 400 US. Now, this was a first focal plane optic with a 60 MOA's worth of internal adjustment, really positive clicks. Now, this is where you start to see everything being pretty much like you shouldn't have any 100 and 400. Well, at 300 your turrets might have a little bit of sponginess, but at 400 I mean you got some really nice turrets. The glass quality is quite surprisingly nice. I mean, I was quite happy shooting up to about I was shooting that day at about 530 meters, but I mean I could have taken it up to 1,000, which I would have seen some chromatic aberration at that point, but it was a pretty good optic. So personally, if let's say I was on a budget and I wanted the best bang for the buck, I would likely look to spend somewhere between $300 and $450 to really get that sweet spot for buying an optic.
Okay.
Anything below, you're going to be a little disappointed with some stuff, and you're going to wish you kind of spent, a little extra $100, which I mean you should have. And I think it's really beyond that where you start to see very minor changes. Glass quality on stuff above that gets a little bit better, like $100 at a time. It's really marginal changes. So, I mean, yeah, that's kind of how I've seen a lot of these optics.
Okay. So then let's talk about what features are a must have or what you're looking for when you're shopping for those optics. So let's go along the same price points. Let's say in the cheap stuff. What's a must have for you if you're going to either recommend it or buy it for yourself?
Well, if I'm going to recommend it, well, first of all, the glass quality. That's the first and foremost. I mean, with those optics, let's say below 150 US, consider these optics not optics that you're going to be dialing on all day. Although they do have large turrets that are made for dialing, I wouldn't rely on them the most. Even the last one I just reviewed, it has a really nice reticle. Use it. Uh, But yeah, like I would recommend that last optic we did review. It was pretty good. The glass quality was decent. The reticle was fairly fine. These are things that I'm going to be looking for. The turrets, I am going to look at it, but it's not a deal breaker. I mean, you set it, and then you should be kind of forgetting about it. Use that reticle. So that's usually what I'm going to be looking for in a budget optic.
Hmm.
Now, if I'm looking at this price point, I'm not looking for something to put on my 308 because it wouldn't necessarily be as reliable as let's say if you pay $300 to $400. That's what I essentially would be the minimum that I would put on a 308. That's kind of what I want to look at spending. Um, Below that, I'd say keep it on a 22, put it on a 223, but if you're going to put it on a 308, just assume that it'll die at some point and don't be upset when it does.
See, I think I'm a gun snob. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm an optic snob, or at least I've been called an optic snob because my first video that I did for the channel was the $2,500 Leupold Mark V HD. But I promise I do have actually normal scopes as well. So one of my favorites at this price point, and I think it was even less than $50. It was the Bushnell Rimfires, the Bushnell Banner Rimfire scope, which I think when I bought it was like $40 or $50. You're able to find it at Walmart. I think Bushnell discontinued that scope because they're like, wow, this is actually really, really good scope for the money. So, I mean, obviously it was like quarter MOA adjustments. No zero stops, none of those fancy features, but it was a rimfire scope and the glass quality was really good and it held zero. So to me, I think like that was a really, really good deal. But kind of like at that, I think like that 100 to 125, probably up to 150. One of my favorites over the longest time has been the Nikon Pro Staff series of rifles. I'm sorry, scopes. And generally what I found, so I mean, you're not going to have a ton of fancy features. I mean, they're still going to be 1 inch tubes. But like say, for example, the 3 to 9 by 40 was a really well built scope that we've shot it even in some of the larger magnums and it held up just fine. And I guess the other aspect about it that we haven't talked about yet, but I guess it would be a good time now, is the warranty. So is that worth it, and does that factor into your buying decision?
So when I'm looking at buying a cheap optic, let's say on AliExpress or Wish, regardless of what the seller says is the warranty, I just assume there's no warranty. Regardless that they guarantee, oh, we'll take care of you for 2 years. Okay, so you're buying a scope for $150. It's going to cost you $80 to ship it there. Now, it could cost you less because I mean I've had some instances on eBay where the scope broke and I said, well, I want my money back, and they told me to ship it back. The only way I would ever ship it back is with tracking and with signature, which was $80. Because a lot of the time, which I've been had multiple times, um, they may receive it, they may not, and they'll just say we never received it, and you're out your money and you're out your scope, and you have nothing now to show with all that money wasted. So at that price point, assume there is no warranty, and which is also why I still recommend just keep it on a low recoiling rifle. On a 22, you likely won't need a warranty unless you drop it.
Okay. And I guess I would say, like the good part is, so I'm obviously not eBay because that's just a regular marketplace. But if, nope. So actually, let me just do this. I got it fixed, but now I just got to fix this. There we go. Um, but if you're buying on Amazon, I mean, they are generally, I think, going to stand behind the product, at least if it's within the first 30 days. And I guess I'd rather buy it on Amazon because they'll take care of the shipping if you're a Prime member. I'm not sure how it is in the 51st state.
Okay, so Amazon, we have Amazon Prime, so that usually makes it free as well. But you're going to see the exact same optics on Amazon that you're going to see on AliExpress,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes on Wish, and you're going to be paying about 25% more. The same thing goes with anything. I'm
Hmm.
looking for a tripod for my camera equipment. If I look on Amazon, I'm looking for at least 25% more. It really comes down to can you survive waiting, I guess, 3 weeks? Or do you really, really need it tomorrow? That's really my decision making. Whereas if I'm looking at Amazon, is if I need it now. If I need SD cards for my camera, it's Amazon. I actually don't trust the ones on AliExpress because a lot of the times they're fakes. But yeah, so that's kind of how I look at it.
All right. So before we move on, so if somebody's just joining the podcast, live stream, they're looking for an optic and their budget is $100. Let's say One's looking for a red dot, one is looking for a scope. What do you recommend?
All right, so for a scope, it really depends. What are you doing? Is this for a 22 long rifle? Is this for deer hunting with your 308? I really kind of need the specifics. How far are you
Creator's
going to be?
choice.
Creator's choice. All right, well, if you got $100 to spend on a 22, I mean, the world is your oyster. There's just so many options that are decent to pretty good. If you're kind of wanting to get into the long range market with your Target Ruger 1022, I mean, there are a ton of options that even on my channel I've reviewed, and none of them are really bad for that. If you're looking for your 308, you know what, and you have $100 to spend, I'm not going to recommend anything off AliExpress or Wish or, well, Amazon is very different, but
Hmm.
I would look at your used Craigslist. I mean, you're going to see some Nikon Pro Staff. Well, maybe not at $100, but you're likely going to see the Buckmaster. I mean, it'll survive recoil with a heavy recoiling rifle. That's a good option. So that's kind of what I would recommend in that case.
Okay.
What was the second point you wanted?
So
Oh, the
let's say, for
red
example,
dot.
red dot. Have you come across any that are good?
Dots. Red dots I've had some pretty limited experience with, other than the um, 30, 40, $50 off of eBay, Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I couldn't really speak to what you get for $100 red dot. In my opinion, though, what I've observed with the cheap red dots compared to like the Crossfire is a lot of the time these are the same frame. They're just usually something else around it. If you look at the Vortex Crossfire and a $20 red dot on eBay, you're going to notice that it has the same frame. Now, I'm assuming there's a lot better quality control and a few things, but I'm guessing that these are likely the same housings on the inside. If you look at the Bushnell TRS-25,
Mm-hmm.
you look on that at Amazon, you're going to find it for, what is it, around $70?
Something like that.
Something like that. You usually see that same thing on on eBay for about 30. Now, this one's coming from Shenzhou in China. Now, do you think this is made in the same warehouse and just branded by another optic? What do you want to spend?
Yeah.
30 or 70?
Precisely. And actually, it's great that you brought that particular optic up because, I mean, the Bushnell is considered like a really good one, but then you have one of the ones that's brought up is the Feyyachi, Feyyachi, which in full disclosure, I did just get one sent to me, so we'll be taking a look at that, and we'll be taking a look at that versus the Loophole Freedom Dot. But apparently, it does have pretty good reviews, and as long as I guess you don't have too high of expectations, it should be pretty good. All right, so let's move up to $100 to $250. What are you looking for? What type of features? What's a must-have?
Okay, so between $100 and $250, I mean,
Yes.
you're going to see a lot of variances there.
Here,
At
let's call it
$100,
250. Let's call it 250.
okay, let's just say 250. So you're going to get some decent turrets. They're still going to have some sponginess, but not nearly as much as at the 150 to and lower. This is really where you start to see the optics world kind of take a good step up. Now, I'm specifically talking about the Chinese optics,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the Canadian or U.S. market branded optics. You're going to see them take a step up. Let's say Vector or Discovery. This is where they get a lot better than the others. The turrets are positive. The glass is nice and clear. It's something that you can shoot up to 600, and you're like, that's pretty decent. I can make out my target, and it's not too blurry. It's nice. It's usable, and yeah, so it's pretty decent.
Now, with those optics, let's say, for example, a $250 Chinese optic, would that compare to, say, a $250 branded optic from a major manufacturer, or is it going to be a significantly better optic?
So in the Chinese market, I mean, I would say their quality is better at that price because I mean the Canadian market they have to there's a lot more middlemen, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they buy the optic from China. There's the seller, there's a distributor, there's the shipper. Everybody gets their hands on it. Everybody wants to make a good 30% or something like that. So uh, the normal U.S. market can't compete with that. Now, with the US market, what you have is convenience. You buy a Bushnell, which is under the ironclad warranty. Well, some of them are. You have convenience of if it breaks, you just send it back to a US place and you
Yeah.
get another one back. Now, on some instances, now the Chinese are looking to rectify this. Vector has, Discovery hasn't. Um, is that if it breaks, it might be lifetime warranty, but you still got to ship it all the way back to China. So, but at the end, to answer your question, is usually you get a little bit more with the Chinese ones. Sometimes the quality control isn't there. Occasionally, you will get a lemon, so you just have to expect that. Uh, so yeah.
Okay. So what type of feature? If you're gonna spend $250, what is a must-have that optic better have?
Well, for me, it better have pretty decent glass. That's the first thing I'm going to look at. It should be able to track, which I mean, every optic should. So that's not really on the table for that. It should have good eye relief. That's something I'm really picky about. I like being around 3.5 to 4. If I mean,
Okay.
if they're advertising 3.2, I'm thinking, well, geez, that's just sad and disappointing. At $250, it should have decent eye relief, specifically from China. Now, on the US brands, you don't always get that. $250, you might get something with some pretty lousy eye relief. I reviewed a Ride-On RTS Mod 3 Gen 2. Now, that's a mouthful, but it's actually a really nice optic. The turrets were really nice. Everything was really, really good about this optic, with the exception of the eye relief. I think it had 3.3 inches of eye relief, which I was like, wow, the glass was HD. This retails for I think $300 US, which I don't think I can have anything that'll actually top that at that price. This is probably likely the best $300 optic that I've found thus far,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of eye relief, which is 3.3, which really brings it down one good notch. But for glass quality, that one was on top.
Yeah.
So eye relief is really something at that price that you know what you need to have it perfect.
Okay.
3.5 to 4 is what I'm looking for.
So what's your take on it? So one of the optics that I really liked, and I guess from my perspective, is it's an assumption that the glass quality is going to be pretty good. One of the things that completely drives me bonkers, and it was in one of the scopes that has actually pretty good reviews, and I think you would like it. I think you'd be much more fair on it, or I guess let me say less harsh. Was the Sightmark Citadel? So it's one of the scopes that I reviewed earlier this year, and it's for entry level scope. It was like a 6 to 24 by 50 front focal plane. Glass quality was really good. Build quality was pretty good. And once again, it had the full lifetime warranty. The one thing that I still couldn't justify is that the parallax adjustment was very tough to adjust. I had to get away from I couldn't adjust it with two fingers from while I'm still behind the gun. It's like you almost have to like come off the gun and really turn it yourself. So like that's number one. And the second one is actually like when the magnification adjustment isn't super smooth. So it's interesting. I mean, do you forgive that or is it just me?
Well, I mean that really depends. How much did you? How much is the Sightmark
I think it's about
Citadel?
$250. I mean, it's right around in that price point. So once again, I mean,
No,
everything else was fine.
yeah. I mean at that price, you can kind of expect some amount of little details like that that you're going to have to accept. I mean, likely it's not all of them that have that. I mean, I looked at the Discovery ED 6 to 24 by 50, and no, it was the magnification. Yeah, it was the magnification adjustment was really really stiff. There's actually a seller that commented in on underneath that video and said he just received a box of them and none of them were stiff like mine. So I think sometimes, at that price, $250, it's quality control. It's somebody put that one of those O-rings in the magnification adjustment might have been a little thicker than all the rest. They're kind of putting lower end parts in there, and likely that's what's causing the stiffness and such.
Yeah. And it seems like it's a common trend because one of the other optics that I recently looked at, and I haven't done a video on it yet, I'm still kind of debating whether I want to, but you've actually seen it on the gun, and it also fits perfectly in this price point, which is the Nico Sterling 6 to 24 by 50, which was on the Mossberg MVP, and I actually had it on the Darkstorm rifle in the Darkstorm Visits the Range. And what I found with this one was, so once again, I mean, the build quality was pretty good. The parallax was exactly where it's supposed to. The eye relief was good. The eye focus was spot on. Turrets were nice and clean, and they adjusted and it tracked and does all that stuff fine. Wasn't really a huge fan of an illuminated reticle. I mean, like to me, that's not really necessary, or at least, and we can talk about that, what you think about it. But the thing that kind of got me was once again though the parallax adjustment. And it seems like it's a very common design, but it was much more difficult to adjust the parallax fairly easily. It was very, very stiff. And the other thing was, while during the daytime the glass was perfectly fine, as soon as it started getting a little bit darker outside, so let's say for example about an hour before sunset, as soon as you go into full magnification, it just the amount of light coming in just completely drops, and like the picture just gets dark so fast.
I mean, what I think around that price range, if you're looking at a high magnification optic, at that price, your glass is going to suffer at especially at the higher magnifications. Whereas if you're looking at a $250, for example, I think the Nikon Pro Staff P5
Mm-hmm.
2.5 10 by 42, the glass in that thing was really really nice. Although you know you're not cranking that thing to 24 because well it doesn't have it, but you might necessarily see it wouldn't be quite as clear as well. So I mean, if you're looking for high magnification around that price, in the evening it's not going to work nearly as well. So that's kind of something you have to
Yeah.
keep in mind.
And I suppose basically it's going to be a really good question for people to determine. It's what would they rather have? Let's say, for example, if you have a budget of $250 or so, it's would you rather have a really good scope that's going to be a 1 inch tube, and let's say it might be just a 3 to 9, or let's say up to 4 to 12, or even like up to 15 magnification, rather than spending the same amount of money to get a 6 to 24 with a 30 millimeter tube, but everything else is going to be more subpar. And I guess that's really, at that price point, that's really the question mark, isn't it?
Well, it really depends on what you're doing. If you're deer hunting up to 200, a 3 to 9 is perfect. You really don't need anything higher than that. I mean, 6 to 24. I mean, what if the deer is between 50? You're going to have some trouble kind of finding it if you have it on its highest magnification. That's really not what you're going to want. So in that case, 3 to 9 is just ideal. So you want to spend the whole $200 on the best 3 to 9 that you can find, shop around even the used market, which is a great idea. Or you know what, Optics Planet always has specials on optics, and it really doesn't depend on which brand is better than another. It depends on which decent brand is on special right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I guess that's actually, you also bring up a really good point about buying used. It's like whether it's something that would be recommended. So, I mean, typically, when it comes to firearms, I'm 100% not opposed to buying a used gun, but not for a first timer, not for somebody who's brand new and doesn't know what they're looking for. I guess would that same thing apply to optics? And that's a good question, I guess.
I would actually argue potentially the contrary for firearms, and I would agree with you for optics. Optics, if they're covered under a lifetime warranty, personally, I don't care too much if they're scuffed, especially because all I do is reviews and then I sell them again. But for rifles, especially a target rifle, if you're familiar with barrel erosion, and I mean, you shoot 6.5 PRC, which is a really fast bullet. I mean,
It's not that
your
bad.
barrel's going to die really quickly. I mean, so if let's say you bought this 6.5 PRC, you know, that really nice Ruger that you were
Mm-hmm.
shooting, from some kid who doesn't know the first thing about barrel erosion, that it's largely caused by fire, not friction. Well, he probably just shot one after another and emptied about 3 boxes in about 10 minutes. And that barrel might be completely gone unless you can test it to verify for yourselves. So, I mean, that's where I really go, well, do I really want to risk that? You know, if I buy this target rifle and what if the barrel's gone? You know, and then I have to put a new damn barrel in the thing.
So I'm going to answer the same question the exact same way in the thing that you just brought up. Ruger stands behind their product, and a lot of the companies will have really good warranties. They do stand behind them so that if some person was not super smart, you'd be covered. But no, actually, that's a fantastic point though on optics, which I completely forgot about. I honestly, and I apologize for that, but a lot of the companies they will warranty it for life, and they don't necessarily require registration, and they're going to stand behind it no matter who buys it. So, for example, I mean, I have this Leupold VX1. Oh, sorry, it's the Leupold Rifleman, and it's lifetime warranty, and it's kind of the same way as in the Leupold Mark V HD video. We had a Leupold rep on there, and he's like, "Look, we warranty the scope, not just it's a little bit more money, but it's warranted not just for your lifetime, but your children and your grandchildren's lifetime as well."
Yeah. But then if you're looking at test, so let's say you buy this firearm, which actually I just did what I said I shouldn't do. I bought a used target rifle. I just got in the mail today. I just got a Tika T3X Varmint 6.5 Creedmoor. Well,
Okay.
actually the T3, not the T3X. And the guy before me said he didn't shoot it and he bought it used and it's been bedded and stuff and the bolt has some spiraling on it. And I was like, oh, I really want it, but I don't want to spend. I don't want to buy a new one and pay tax because I mean, if I buy it without the tax on a used one, then I can spend all that money on bullets. Right? I'm really cheap, so I winged it this time. Every once in a while, I'll take a risk, but usually I would completely not do what I just did. But let's say you buy a used one, so which is exactly what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go to the range. I'm going to start my load development. How many bullets? So how much is it per bullet? It's going to be about 50 cents per bullet, plus the powder using, plus
Mm-hmm.
the primers, plus your time. When you're buying when you're testing this optic. Now, how many bullets am I going to put through this optic before I go, whoa, this barrel is shot out? I'm going to have to go through the whole load development.
Yeah.
If let's say I get 3-inch groups the whole way across, then I got a pretty good idea that I wasted all that ammo, all that bullet, that powder. Now I'm going to have to pay, at 30, 40, 50, actually more like $50 shipping all the way to whoever does I think it's Stoger who does the warranty work for Tika.
Mm-hmm.
And then how long am I going to wait before they, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. Here you go.
Yeah.
Back at you, bud. Sometimes I just like look at that risk and I'm like, that's just a pain in the butt.
Yeah. And I guess it might be a little bit different for Canadians versus down here, but I mean, I've over the years, I'm not gonna put the number, but the vast majority of the guns that I purchased were used, with the exception of the first couple of guns I definitely bought new. And especially considering at least down here, and you know what, it might be really different up in Canada where you got to jump for much more hoops in order to buy a gun. So if you're gonna buy it, people are gonna use it. But I guess down here in the States, most of the guns that you see, if it's a used gun and it has more than 500 rounds, it's rare. Generally, most of the used guns that I buy, if they had a box of ammo for them, that's a lot.
That's pretty true. Most people they go once every 2-3 months. They shoot a little bit, they put it back in the box, they put it in the safe for a few more months, and they
Yeah.
don't shoot. That's a pretty good point. Yeah.
All right, so let's finish this one up with, so when you're moving up to, let's say, your $500 to $1,000 optics, I mean, I'm assuming everything better work right. Um, the glass quality better be pretty good. What other features are you looking for at that price point? I mean, and I guess it's personal preference. I mean, do you like the illuminated reticles, reticle choices, zero stops? What type of things are you looking for?
So personally, I mean, I really don't care about illumination. I'm never shooting at dusk or dawn. I mean, even deer hunting, my deer are usually within about 15 to 30 yards. So illumination, I don't need it. Um, but what you start to see at $500 US to about 1,000, well, depending on the brand, the fancier the brand you go, the less you really get. But if let's say you look at Vortex, the Viper HST, which I think it retails for around 700-800 US, but it's always on sale at 560 on Optics Planet. So if I was, let's say we're at that price, I would also be looking at other optics similarly, which Miopta, the Optica 6, they have something right around the same price point. So what am I going to look at as a difference is, well, both of these have zero stops, which, I mean, they should at that price, unless they have the very best glass you've ever seen in your life. They should have zero stops. The turrets should be really positive and really audible. What else? You should have either a decent reticle or a few options in reticle, which you likely pay a little bit more for, and 60 MOA or more. Now, I've seen
Okay.
occasionally some optics that have 50, and I'm like, what was this company thinking? If you have a 25 MOA, if you have a 0 MOA rail on your 308, 25 MOA, what is that going to get you out to? 600 yards, 700 yards?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking to do some long range shooting, I mean, you're going to have to put a 20 MOA rail. And I mean, in that case, a 50 MOA optic will do, will do. But if you have a zero, I mean, you're going to want an optic with 60 MOA or more.
Yeah, and we'll talk about an expensive optic with only 40 or 50 MOA in it shortly. Um, I guess, do you care whether at that price point it's still made in the States or it's made overseas?
Personally, I don't really care where it's made, provided I'm going to feel it. These turrets, they have to be incredibly audible, very
Yeah.
positive. The glass better be crystal clear, and at that price, there better not be any imperfections at all. Like I mean, at all. I bought the Vortex Viper HST, the 6 to 24 by 50, just a couple months ago to
Mm-hmm.
put on my new teacup. Um, and actually, the parallax adjustments, the focus parallax adjustment, had some slop to it, about a millimeter and a half of play, where like nothing moved on the inside, but this little dial on the outside turns. So that's something that shouldn't happen. And I mean, I sent it actually back because of something entirely different. The windage knob completely fell off that optic.
Nice. So I was say one of my
I was
favorites.
kind of surprised about that.
It happens. So one of the ones I was pleasantly surprised about, and also did the video on it, was the Sightmark Latitude 8 to 32 by 60 F-class rifle scope. So it has MSRP of 779, and you can find it for right around $600 on Amazon and a couple other places. So it's a 34 millimeter tube, 110 MOA of adjustment
Wow.
in the scope. Um, IP67, waterproof, shockproof, everything. And it was really interesting because, I mean, like, here's a scope from, I mean, so Sightmark is a company I'm fairly impressed with. Like, years ago, when I first looked at a couple of them, they were known for, like, cheap stuff that sometimes worked, sometimes didn't. And then last year, for a different channel, I looked at the Sightmark Wolfhound, which was a prismatic sight, which was really nice for the money. And then we had the Citadel. I'm like, okay, well, glass is good. I like the features. I just wasn't crazy about the how stiff the parallax and magnification ring was. So I had moderate expectations for this one. And when the Latitude, when I got it, and we put it on the 6.5 PRC Ruger, which is actually going to be my brother's gun, I was actually really impressed by it. And this one was made in the Philippines, so Philippines, they make a lot of scopes in the Philippines. You have Nikon scopes that are made there. There's a lot of really awesome features on it. And during the daytime, so I had this $600 scope, and I had it out at the range with the $2,500 Leupold Mark V HD. During the daytime, in terms of image quality, it was almost identical. I mean, the difference was there's reticle difference because one's first focal plane, the other one was second, and just the thickness of it. But the amount of light and the glass quality and everything was spot on. And it was only as it started getting darker a bit. So we had the Nico Sterling, it was like done. You couldn't use it as soon as it started getting dark. But the Latitude kept up in there, and it was only until we were shooting after sunset that the Leupold really made it easy to shoot at that time. But I mean, the Latitude for about $600, I'm really impressed. And next week, um, and it was funny. Next week, I'm getting the Latitude that I originally wanted. So I wanted the Latitude in 6 to 24 first focal plane with a PRS reticle, and by accident they sent the Latitude 8 to 32 by 60. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to send it back. I'll review this one, and let me just do this one. Plus my brother who wanted it, he was like, he wants more power, more magnification. So I'm like, okay, we'll hang on to this one. But I'm really interested in on the 6 to 24 PRS reticle with a front focal plane. That should be really interesting optic. But once again, though, I'm really pleasantly surprised at this price point. And I think later on, and I guess we might as well jump to it now, um, the expensive optics, so your $1,000 plus, and once again, I mean, that's a very broad category because, I mean, we have $1,000 scopes from Nikon, Sightmark, pretty much everybody. And then we have the $2,000, $3,000 loopholes, Night Force, Schmidt and Bender, Zeiss, and so forth. So at this price point, what are you looking for?
So it varies quite a bit depending on the brand that you're
Okay.
looking at. For example, Schmidt and Bender at $1,000, they look at you like, go back to the tunnel that you came. Oh, right. We have this like 4 power optic. They're pretty much going to give you this like, oh, and they're going to be like, but it has the best glass, and you're like, not impressed, you know.
Yeah.
But with other brands, they do cater a lot more to you. I have a modest amount of experience with optics in that price range.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the Sig Sauer BDX. That's
Yes.
pretty much the only one which isn't even $1,000. It's about 950 retail, but it's usually on special. I think around 700-800 or something like that.
Okay.
So even that's not quite $1,000 optic. But if you look at that optic alone as $1,000 optic, you're going to be very disappointed unless you factor in its ballistic potential with the app and all its range finding capabilities. That's really where it actually shows value. If you look at this just as an optic, it has a super fat reticle made for the blind.
Okay.
It's got 40 MOAs worth of internal
Yeah.
adjustment.
So
Which
actually,
is
I'm gonna
just,
I'm gonna interject here because we were gonna set up. So we just skipped right into it. For those who are not familiar, so Alex did an awesome video on the SIG BDX. So it's right on his channel. I will put a link to this. And let me actually just put up a browser window. Oh, okay, perfect. We're good. Um, so this is the combo kit that we're looking at. So it's the BDX combo. So SIG recently released their Kilo series rifle scopes and Sierra. Actually, let me rephrase that. Their Kilo series rangefinders and Sierra series scopes. And these are basically the combos they are in the $1,000 price range for your higher end one. But these are a little bit different. So, Alex, for those who might not be familiar with the BDX, why don't you give us an introduction as to the whole premise with this?
all right, so the premise with this optic is essentially to take a noob off the streets, provided you can program the app with your ballistic coefficient. So you can't be quite a noob because you have to know what that means. You need to get your velocity. You put this in the app on the phone. Now, at this point, it gets easy. All you do is range your target. A little light appears in the optic, and you put that light on whatever target you're shooting, and you shoot. Now, you can also program in the wind, which on the x-axis of the reticle, another light will appear. And then you kind of put the dots together, and then you'll hold at that point, and you point and shoot. So it's really like an optic that you can take any noob and set them out. All right, now you can shoot up to 500 meters without having done your time and learning your dope and learning all these things. This optic really bridges that gap. And additionally, it really I think personally it would help with ethical hunting at longer distances. If let's say I'm pretty sure at 325 meters it's 9 MOA, but
Mm-hmm.
with the wind, I'm guessing it would maybe be 1 MOA left or 2. I'm not too sure. With this optic, with the app, you just punch in your data and away you go, and that's it. So I mean, it really takes a lot of the guessing out of shooting.
Yeah. So, and this one actually, it comes with both. So there's a couple of different scopes. So there is, I guess the combo is that way. So, Alex, you'd know this off the top of your head. I think it was a 3 to 9, or what was the scopes that it came with, actually?
Uh, the scope itself is a 6.5 to 20 by
Well, that's the
52.
one that you had, but they had others as well.
Oh yeah, they have a 4.5 to 14 by 44, which is their mid-tier one, and I think they have one even lower than that, one even a little bit cheaper. Yeah, which the kits, I mean, most of the kits do come with a BDX rangefinder.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have them right there, but I think if we look on Amazon, you're going to get the actual street prices.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Sierra.
in the live stream, I have the website pulled up. So it's the 4.5 to 14 kit, which MSRP is 839. Then they have the 3.5 to 10, the 6 and the 6.5 to 20 that we looked at. Yeah, so those are the 3 different scopes. And basically, what the way it works is it uses Bluetooth between the rangefinder and the optic. And the rangefinders, the BDX rangefinders, what they are, they're preloaded with the Applied Ballistics ultralight software, which will automatically make the calculations, and it works with your smartphone, but you just got to pair it once. And then you can put in you set up your bullet profile. So download the app, get the velocity of the bullets as they're coming out of your gun, um, pair or they call it bond, the rangefinder to the scope, and then once it's paired, then just range it, and then it's going to make the adjustments right in the scope, which is really cool. And we did have a question, well, we had a comment in the chat, which was, yes, the scope is advertised for hunting, not target shooting necessarily. Takes the fun out of it, but when hunting big elk or deer, you're aiming for a much broader target. So that's a fantastic point. And so, I mean, in full disclosure, I am not a hunter. I guess I just hunt paper. Um, I look at this as kind of like the way Alex brought it up, which was if somebody's like, okay, for example, I look at this like my brother would be the perfect person for this. He's interested in long range shooting, but he doesn't necessarily have a lot of practical experience with this, which leads to the other type of ethical question, I suppose, is so I mean it's definitely technology, but is it possibly going to be used as a crutch, or are we using this as a learning tool to get somebody in there? What are your thoughts, Alex?
Well, I think it's going to be a crutch, but really it's kind of like your rich man's way of buying his way into shooting up to longer distances. How much money, how far have you shot in the past?
Me?
Yeah,
Um, 2,300 yards.
good Lord. Okay. Maybe that's a bit too much of an example. Well, if I'm
But
going to
no,
take
no, no, no,
myself.
so, no. So to answer that question, and once again, it was the Ruger Media Day when earlier this year when I went to Texas, we played around with the 6.5 PRC Ruger Hawkeye long range target, the Ruger precision rifle, and the 300 PRC Ruger precision rifle, and we shot it out to 2,300 yards. But prior to that, the longest I've generally shot it regularly is 300 yards, with the exception of every so often when you go to SHOT Show at Media Day, you'd shoot up to 1,000, but that wasn't. I mean, that was a couple of rounds that the manufacturers let you shoot. You weren't there just popping it all day. So generally 300 yards. So let's use that as an example. And I think for most people, it's if you do a typical shooter who actually goes and owns a rifle, they're going to shoot no more than 100 yards.
Likely that's the case. Now, I mean, to get up to 300 yards, you had to waste a bunch of ammo until, oh, I figured out that, what, at 300 yards, my 308, that's about, I think, 9 MOAs worth of internal adjustment to get you
Mm-hmm.
on target or something like that. Now, it's essentially the money you spend until you know the learning process. But this optic really, we're just going to take away this learning process, just put that little light on your target, and then you're good to go. So it's really your way of buying into to being able to shoot at these longer distances. You don't have to have years of experience, thousands of dollars wasted or spent in firearms and learning your data, your dope, the differences with the temperature. This optic does the whole thing for you.
Yeah. So, and I think like it was funny. Like, I mean, you're one of the first people to come up with a really good video on the SIG BDX. And in full disclosure, I am waiting to get the kit, same kit as Alex's, so I'm going to play with it. But I have slightly different plans for it. Um, but you had a whole bunch. You had a SIG sent out a bunch of these kits to people to get video reviews. And there's a lot of videos that I saw that were just people who've actually never really shot longer distance. You can tell there's a couple of videos where the guns weren't even shot. It was just a tabletop review. But Alex actually shot it and he put it through its paces. Um, and it's once again, it's really that discussion. Like the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, yeah, you're right. You're gonna have wealthy gun owners, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, who are gonna buy this and use this as an easy way to start shooting longer distance. But I guess I'm hoping that there are people who are gonna use this as a tool to get into long range shooting, so then at that point they can start learning about ballistics and why it actually works.
Yeah, I definitely think that's what it's going to bring in.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure if they're going to really get the pleasure of learning to dial. I think that for me, I love that. I love dialing. I love figuring out my dope. I mean, I've shot probably relatively frequently up to about 500 yards. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what I did is I just, I set at 100, move my paper target to 200. Oh, it drops by this amount. Then I just write down the measurement, got it to 300, it drops by this amount. And then I just went to 400, went up 3 mils, and then I shot. Now it's down this amount. And then I just kept going. And that way, you can gradually get your way out there. You just need access to a longer range.
Yeah, and most,
Whereas,
and like I said, and that's going to be very tough for a lot of people. I guess if you're Cody or if you live out west, yeah, you can just go on public lands and shoot 1,000 yards, not a problem. But I guess in Canada or and actually speak of the devil, I just got my while we're doing this and talking about the Sig must be watching. I just got my tracking number for the Sig BDX.
nice.
So Cloudmass brought up a group point about bridging the gap, and I'll talk about my plans. But I wanted there's one concept that I was really interested in, and I mean I'm a older millennial, but I still am a millennial, and possibly you are too. The question, one of the reviews, they called it that this kit is quote unquote revolutionary. Do you honestly believe? So there's a lot of really cool technology in this. But do you believe this is revolutionary or more evolutionary?
I would say innovative. I wouldn't personally say it's a revolution. I think if you're going to say revolution, that means it would change the way optics are going in general. And I think those who are doing long distance shooting uh, likely like dialing. I think most of us who are doing long distance, we like to use our turrets. That's kind of the point. So, in aspect of evolution, I think no. I think it's making its own branch on its own. But then again, let's not only look at long distance shooting. We also need to look at the other optics that they did make. They made a 4.5 to 14 or even 3.5 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's not long distance. Those aren't made for long distance. Those are made for closer range, up to 300 for deer hunting. In that case, it might be evolutionary, but for long range shooters, I definitely don't think this is going to be the process of evolution for long range optics.
Yeah.
I think it's going to make its own way on its own.
Yeah. So what I'm really excited about, particularly, and when we're talking about from the evolutionary perspective, much like I guess, and I hate to bring it up, but Tesla, and I don't like Tesla, and I think Elon is a fraud. Oh crap! Was I supposed to say that on air, being in the finance world? Okay, I might have to edit that out later. But um, what I see in here is some features that I believe should be in every scope, such as, and give me your take on it. So I haven't played with this myself, but the built-in leveling adjustment on there, I think it's like, holy crap, that's like a really, really cool idea. To have the automatic levelers right in there instead of having to put a bubble level on top of the scope.
So, I mean, I thought that was really cool. And not only does it's just a level, you can also adjust the degree of accuracy of this level between this amount of degrees or that amount of degrees. You can really get as picky as you want to be. So if you're shooting at, 800 yards, you have to be really picky.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, well, it might be a good 3-4 inches to the left because your cant was just that degree off. So that's actually pretty interesting with that. So, I mean, it's got a ton of features in it, not just the leveling, but also like automatic time off. You know what? I'd have to brush up on my specs on that optic. I don't quite remember all of them, but there's a ton of stuff in that optic that it's just like, wow, they packed it with features. I mean, you also have to consider that they're competing against the Burst Eliminator 3, and there's a ton of things that the SIG really just steamrolls the Burst Eliminator 3 with. I mean, this is an optic the SIG is looking to keep going for a good amount of years before any other company starts innovating even more to top them. They want to keep production of this optic for a while. So in that aspect, they packed so much stuff in there that, it's going to be relevant and relevant for quite a few more years.
Yeah. So one of the innovative features that I like about that is, and you can kind of talk to it if you're familiar about it or if you used it. So generally, I'm not a fan of BDC reticles because every gun, let's say for every gun is gonna fire that same type of ammo differently. And I guess the prime example on that is, let's put it, how can you say that the BDC reticle is catered to a particular round when we have I'll use a specific example, the Ruger Precision Rifle in 6.5 PRC versus the Ruger Hawkeye Long Range Target in 6.5 PRC, shot on the same day, and both of those guns use the same barrel. The Hawkeye was 150 feet per second on average faster than the Ruger Precision Rifle, which down the range is going to be an impact of about 200 yards. It'll stay supersonic further for. So for that reason, I'm not a fan of BDC reticles, but it looks like this scope, you can set your own BDC points, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, personally, BDCs, like they're never bang on. Even if like I really don't see the point in any BDC because even if they say, oh, it's made for a 223, well, your 223 is not going to be the same velocity as theirs. I mean, if you're doing your load development, because I mean, I reload. My velocity is going to be whatever my load development decides it's going to be. I think right now it's at 3020. That's my current velocity for my 55 grain. Now, if the BDC is rated for 55 grain, but at I don't know 2,900, well, we're going to be very different. Maybe obviously the 100 is going to be bang on. The 200 is going to be a little bit off.
Yeah.
The 300 is going to be pretty much off. And then what was the point? So in pretty much all cases, BDCs are generally irrelevant. Whereas this optic, I mean, it's a BDC, but it's specifically for whatever you're using.
Yeah.
And if you look in all the options in the app, they have literally every bullet, every weight, and you can even manually put in your ballistic coefficient. So let's say you made your own Wildcat cartridge, and you can figure out your own ballistic coefficient, which if you make your own like cartridge,
You
I'm
have
pretty sure
if
that
you need a lab radar.
yeah. I mean, then you can make that for your
Yep.
cartridge. That's really fantastic.
Yeah. No, so I mean, I definitely think once on the boat, like it's an awesome idea, and for hunters, I think it's almost like a no-brainer because I guess the way that they're marketing it is, for a hunter, you're in a field, just as long as it's sighted in properly, just range the animal and then just shoot. You don't need to do the calculations as long as you have the trust in it. And you're not going to be under the time pressure to do the math and adjust the scope. For target shooting, I think it's a little bit different because then you're extending the distances, and I guess part of the appeal is actually figuring out what the dope on the scope is. But it looks at it is. I like the adjustable BDC points. I think that should be in a lot of the other scopes. But like I said, it is limited to 800 yards. Now, what I do like about that, at least in the kits, so I believe it's the Kilo 2400. So the one that comes in the lower runs do not do that, but the one that comes the 1600, I guess wasn't there like a different one, but the higher end ones, they actually can extend out. So what you'd have to do is get a Kestrel, a wind meter, so the Kestrel 5700 or the 5700 Elite, which also runs on Applied Ballistics software and has the link feature. So what would happen is, instead of the calculations going from the rangefinder into the scope, it would go rangefinder feeds the Kestrel the distance. And then the Kestrel is actually it's loaded with the full Applied Ballistics Elite software, which does not have that 800 yard limitation on it, and then it'll feed that firing solution to the scope. So it's not, so if you're buying the kit, you can absolutely shoot past 800 yards. You just need to involve a Kestrel to get the appropriate dope. Now, I think you're still going to run issues with the internal adjustment on there, but because it is second focal plane, you're going to be that. But that's basically my plans on this. So as soon as I get it, we're going to throw it on one of the guns. And I'm going to zero it at 100 or probably 200 or 300 if we're going to, because the gun has a 300, I'm sorry, the gun has a 30 MOA rail on that.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to go out to a range. It's 1,000 yard range. Possibly we can shoot a little bit further. And I'm I'm not. It's the first time going there, so I don't know any of the distances of the targets, and that's how we're going to run it through its paces. Uh,
What cartridge are you going to be putting it on?
so there, I think the big one that I really wanted to do is the Ruger Precision Rifle in 300 PRC.
Okay.
But that comes with a 30 MOA rail. But the alternative is since that gun, and I just finished most of the video on the 300 PRC, I put the Loophole Mark 5 HD on that. So the Ruger Hawkeye long range target in 6.5 PRC is free. So I might put the BDX combo on that gun, which only has a 20 MOA rail, so we should be good on that. Um, or and I might be crazy, but I might go back to that Mossberg MVP in 224 Valkyrie and start developing some loads for that, and hopefully that gun is not a 3 MOA gun.
Yeah, those groups, I was honestly like, wow, that's really kind of sad.
Yeah, that's a long story, and it's already late on that one. It's tough, but hey, I did get a decent group on there with the Hornady ELD match. Once again, since we're talking about it, in full disclosure for the Precision Rifle series, Hornady does provide the ammo, and Sig is sending me out this kit.
Nice.
All right, so then, okay, so we talked about those features. We talked about that. It is revolutionary, or so then while prepping for this call, we actually did discuss what would be a revolutionary optic. Uh, if you haven't seen it, earlier this year for SHOT Show 2019, this company Sensite, they launched this thing. So it's still not in production. I guess we're still beta testing it. Um, but it's a fully digital optic. This might actually, I would kind of consider this revolutionary, which completely changes the way that the scope works. So it still does have the glass and everything in there, but it is digital. And the main appeal with it, so this is the top of the optic. So you can put in the range. It has, I believe, the rangefinder. Actually, I don't think it has the rangefinder in there, but it can give you the solution. So it's a GPS tracker. It's a touch screen, so you can use the magnification that you want from 3 to 20x. It has some features.
Well, that's nuts. 20 magnification on something the size of a red dot?
Yes, it's digital.
Wow.
So I think that's revolutionary. But once again, though, so I mean, like, I think the challenge with this, and even kind of going back and circling to why I think the SIG BDX is relatively safe, is what it merely does and why it's evolutionary rather than revolutionary, is that it takes stuff that already currently works and it just applies technology to let people make the most out of it rather than trying to reinvent something from brand new, such as this. And I guess basically the big issues on the digital ones was there's significant lag. So on the screen, let's say, for example, for target shooting, it's not going to be an issue. But if, let's say, for example, you're going after game, there would be a lag between the time that you see it in the scope versus what's actually downrange and moving. And once again, though, I mean, they've been developing it for a while, and it was supposed to be released early this year. And I checked recently, and it's still not out. But so let's say going back to the BDX combo, and Alex, you looked into this deeper. There were some other scopes that had a rangefinder built in, and I guess SIG could have done that, but it would have looked ugly. Um, but I guess my personal take on it, I like the fact that rather than creating something brand new, they took existing technology that works and they made it work together.
Yeah, I definitely see. I mean, the having the rangefinder in the optic, that's definitely an advantage. However, I mean, how much uh, kind of stuff can you pack into an optic before it just gets overly bulky? And I mean, for example, like the burst eliminator. Now, other people have argued that you know what, the burst eliminator, if you're shooting at those ranges, well, you're going to be resting it on something, so that's not really a concern. But if you look at all the technology that they've put for the Sig Sauer BDX, I think they're going to need even bigger than the burst eliminator. So I think them separating the rangefinder, this way you have a top-notch rangefinder and a
Yes.
really good optic. I mean, if you had to combine these, you'd either have something that's grotesque and massive, or it just wouldn't work that well. So I
Yeah.
mean, having these separate, I think, is a really good idea, and having them bonded via Bluetooth, I think, is a really good idea. I mean, you're usually going to have your rangefinder anyway, so you might as well rangefind, and now you're ready to go.
Yeah. Um, and I guess one of them, and it was a really good point. One of the things that I liked about in your video was you talked about what other optics that had the rangefinder built in, and most of them were discontinued, including the very high end, the Zeiss Dia range, which had the rangefinder built into it. It looked ugly as sin, and it made it significantly heavier, but they were all discontinued.
Yeah. However, the Zeiss range finding reticle, they do have a new one though, which is even more expensive, about $4,000 rangefinder scope. I'm not sure what this one's called, but I did not remember what it was for the video, but there is one out there that is around $4,000. So they do have one out there, which isn't discontinued, but the Dia range is. I'm assuming that the technology, the software, the little processors in that optic, they were just no longer relevant. So they're like, you know what, we're just going to scrap the Dia range and then make an entirely new one from scratch.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at what SIG did, is they didn't put too much in the optic, and they made everything else do the work. The phone does pretty much all the work. All it does is communicates to the optic saying, put a light here, put a light there.
Yeah.
That's it. Figure it out. So, I mean, your phone is essentially the one that's going to be constantly updating.
Yeah.
Whereas your scope, they don't have to update that every 5 years, which I think is largely why the other companies had to discontinue these models, is they put all the software, all the technology in the optic.
Yeah.
Whereas SIG is like, well, let's put 40 MOA. We're going to put a light here, a light there, and something to receive the light, receive the direction for the light, and that's it. In every couple of years, I mean, you're upgrading your phone, aren't you? I am not, but most people are.
The last time I upgraded my phone was, I believe it might have even been one of your videos that I was watching. I had a perfectly good iPhone. I was watching your video in the shower, and then the phone dropped and cracked the screen. So now I have a new phone. um, but actually, so I was just thinking about it. I mean, I can definitely see. So one of the questions I had was, okay, well, why would you need a rangefinder already built into the scope versus having it separate? Because let's say if you're target shooting, let's say you're going out and you need to range a steel plate or something along those lines, that plate is not moving. If it was at 1,000 yards 2 minutes ago, it's still at 1,000 yards right now. But I suppose if you're a hunter, yes, I can definitely see that. Let's say you take a shot or the animal starts moving, and having a constant updated range would be good. Or I guess if you're in the military and you're hunting humans, that would be a different story. But I guess for most ethical hunters who believe in one shot, one kill, and target shooters, that target's not moving. So why add the bulk to the scope when you can just range it and then just send the solution to the scope and then you're good to go?
Yeah, I think the minute you start going at longer distances as well, your target isn't aware of your presence as well. If you're shooting deer and they're grazing at, I don't know, 3, 4, 500 yards away, uh, you can take this rangefinder out and range find and then get a good stance and then shoot. I mean, obviously, it's more ideal to, just take the rifle and point and shoot, but a lot of the time when they're at longer distances, they're not spooked. They're not like ready on the move. And I mean, then again, if they are on the move, is this going to be an ethical shot anyway?
Okay.
So I would say, you know what, and you're going to want a good rangefinder. Do you want a okay rangefinder that's stuck in a scope because they had to, tolerances? Well, we couldn't make the scope too big and all this. I mean, look at the size of this rangefinder.
Yeah.
Imagine if you have to cram that in the optic.
No, absolutely. And I guess like really for the price point, so the kit, so the one that we're looking at right now, the one that you tested, it's on Amazon. I saw it was right around $1,000, $1,000 to $1,100. I guess between the scope and the rangefinder. And looks at the rangefinder is really good on its own merits. By all accounts, by all the reviews that I read, it's a really good rangefinder. And I guess the scope, I mean, if you take the technology out, I guess it's a decent scope in terms of features, but I guess I'm assuming the glass quality is really good and everything works as it's supposed to, right?
So if you take away the technology out of this optic and leave it technologyless, this is actually, I would personally think this is a pretty boring optic.
Okay.
Really, 40 MOAs worth of internal adjustment. I mean, that's just disappointing. The turrets, I mean, they're actually fairly positive. They're not very audible. The parallax, there's no slop. There was essentially the optic is pretty much perfect, but it's lacking a lot of things that you would
Okay.
want in a $950 retail optic. I personally wouldn't buy this scope if it wasn't for the technology. It has HD glass, which that's great. So at least the glass is there, which is very, very important. If you're shooting at long ranges, you need to have a crisp, sharp image. They couldn't skimp on that. Yeah, and I mean even the eye relief, that was something that was really good on this optic. But yeah,
Cool.
other than that, it was a pretty basic optic as far as features. You got the high magnification, good glass, but the turrets is something that I really look at. If I was looking at a $950 scope, you're gonna need more than 40 MOA to and get me to buy your product.
Yeah, and that was really interesting. So I mean, it is a 30 millimeter tube, but I mean, like only 40 MOA adjustment. I was like, okay, it's a little bit low, but I guess it is. So they call it their digital focal plane. So what's interesting? So the reticle size stays the same throughout. Um, so if you zoom out, I guess you do have more adjustment that way because what happens? So the even though the reticle is in the second focal plane, the BDC, the dots, they basically just they can move anywhere along that,
Yeah,
and
that's
anywhere along
something
the
that I
radio.
noticed. That's something that I noticed in my reviews. Is that when I was like trying to aim at, or actually, I think it was even at 530 meters when I was shooting in the video, I had to back off the magnification somewhat because my red dot was blinking at the bottom, which meant that I need to back it off a little in order to get a just a holdover point. So I was kind of like, why is it blinking? And then I cranked it back and then noticed it move, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I can't stay on 24, or I would need a cartridge that's more flat shooting,
Yep.
or I would have to zero it at a farther distances, which is what you're considering.
Yes. So we'll
Yeah,
take a look at that. I mean, it's going to be interesting. But when I did the ballistics calc, I was like, okay, so for a flatter shooting cartridge, it's just 300 PRC. Changing the zero from 100 to 200, it was only it was like half a mil. I mean, like it wasn't even worth it. It wasn't gonna make any difference. Um, so I'm like, okay, I probably have to do the calc whether 300 was gonna be enough. But the cool part is, so for those who are not familiar, so it's a sick product, but the engine and the guts behind it are by Applied Ballistics, which they do a lot of ballistic software. In some of their videos, what they basically said was that this was just the beginning, and there are going to be other products out there that are going to run on the Applied Ballistics Elite engine that will go further. So I guess my ultimate thing was if we can get like a proper, like for example, like the Sig Tango 6, if we can get like a 5 to 30 scope, or let's say even like a 6 to 20, like a 5 to 25, if we can get the ballistic software to work with those type of a scopes, and let's say not instead of a 30 millimeter tube, let's say have a 34 or 35 millimeter scope, like a higher end scope, I think that would be amazing. I think that would be killer. I mean, I guess that's a bad word of saying it, but I mean, like that. I think I would be really excited about that. I'd be like, okay, you know what? That's damn good piece of technology that even a lot of target shooters would go. Um,
yeah,
and especially, like, I think the higher end Sig ones, if they have like the wind meter in there, like if you're a PRS shooter, if you're shooting any gun games, it's literally take out the rangefinder, click, you have the wind, you have the angle of attack. It goes right into your scope. You just pull the trigger and you're done. I mean, I think it's going to take a lot of fun out of it, but I think once again, though, it's kind of going back to it. Is like, I, you know what? It is a crutch. I absolutely think it's a crutch for those who are going to use it that way. But you know what though? For somebody who's brand new and wants to get into long range shooting, I think this is going to be a fantastic tool that's going to let them enjoy long range shooting without first going through a 2 day class on ballistics.
yeah, yeah.
Cool.
think that might be the case. You mentioned larger tube diameters and more internal adjustment. This is actually something that, I mean, I've looked at a lot of optics, and a lot of the time I'm noticing tube diameter doesn't have all that much to do with amount of internal adjustment. If you
Okay.
look at the Vortex HP, which, I mean, sorry for you Americans, but they discontinued that one for you guys, which is actually a fantastic optic. The Vortex HP, was it a 4 to 16 by 42, which this optic has BD glass. It has 85 MOAs worth of internal adjustment. Now, this is a capped turret system, so it's more of a hunting optic. But this optic was actually really affordable. But with 85 MOAs worth of internal adjustment, and I mean, you see a lot of even 30 millimeter tubes, and they're giving you 60. And I'm thinking, well, why did you bother making it a 30 millimeter tube? And then some people have said, oh, it's for better light transmission. But according to other, you know, other people who've reviewed even more scopes, who do a lot more long range shooting, they've actually debunked that and said that larger tube diameter doesn't necessarily mean
Yeah.
more light or better glass clarity. So,
Yeah.
what are you really getting in the end?
Well, I think it's really going to depend on everything working as a system. So, for example, the Loophole Mark 5 HD, which has a 35 millimeter tube, it has 120 MOA worth of elevation adjustment.
Yeah.
120 MOA elevation, and then 60 MOA in windage.
Okay, so how big of a tube was that?
35.
Okay, so let's look at the, sorry for you Americans again, let's look at the Vortex Strike Eagle 3 to 18 by 50. And this optic is around 500 US. Strike Eagle.
Which one was it? The what power? What magnification? 3 to 18, you said?
18 by 44.
Okay.
You're going to have to go to the Vortex Canada website because you Americans actually don't have access to this one,
I'm pulling it up right now.
which I'm actually very surprised of.
Okay, so 599, 30 millimeter tube. Um, wow, it has 120 MOA max elevation adjustment.
Yeah. Now I'm assuming obviously your loopholed the clicks are probably far more precise, like they actually measure the right distance between clicks, whereas the
Yeah,
Strike Eagle, it's probably very close, but it's not nearly as precise. And having a larger body would mean you can put a better system in. But at
yeah.
the end of the day, a lot of the time, I see 34 millimeter tubes. I've seen it with Discovery Optics. They sell this 34 millimeter tube with, I think, was it 15 mils of internal adjustment? And I'm like, well, why'd you bother? I mean, now you have to buy $150 scope rings for a scope with 15 mils. I mean, that's just sad.
Yeah.
You might as well get a 30 millimeter tube. So, I mean, a lot of the time, I think it's a marketing thing. I mean, obviously, a 30 millimeter tube is going to be stronger. So that's another point. But how often do you see a 1 inch tube breaking? I haven't.
I
So
haven't yet either.
that factor's like, but if they're not going to break, then do you really need it? But obviously, you can fit more MOA, but it's a lot of the companies aren't. They're putting a 30 millimeter tube. Sometimes they're not advertising the amount of internal adjustment, and they're just selling them more, and they're catering to a market that's looking for long range shooting.
Okay. Cool. Now, did you have a video on the Strike Eagle, or did you, or it was another Vortex that you had?
No, I haven't. I actually was looking, I was debating on buying the Strike Eagle or the Vortex Viper HST, and I went with the Viper HST. In
Okay.
the future, I am looking to get my hands on one, but soon enough, I'm going to have the Vortex. What's the new one they came out with just recently? It was the first focal plane optic.
I do not know the Vortex lineup. Unfortunately, I do not.
Okay, it's pretty much their newest one. It's the first focal plane. It's got ED glass and it retails for 500 US, which usually on Optics Planet means it's going to retail for around, or they're going to sell it for about 400, which I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to probably be reviewing that in the next month or two.
Awesome. All right. I look forward to that. All right, so we've been already on for almost an hour and 50 minutes. Time
Oh,
flies when
wow.
you're having fun, and both of us live on East Coast time, so it is just as late for us. So I guess let's basically start. Any closing thoughts, or did we have questions from the audience? And yes, the SIG homepage is actually really good. They invest a lot of money, and you know what? I guess like I'll get on my little soapbox. SIG is investing a lot of money. So I mean, SIG under new management, I mean, they are trying to get SIG involved everywhere. So I mean, they went from just handguns. They have Blazer. They're going to they deep into the rifle world. They have suppressors. They have ammunition. Now they have optics. Um, they're spending a lot of money. Hopefully, it's going to be up there. And I'm really excited about a lot of the products. I mean, I think there's a lot of technology in there, so I'm hoping that they're going to be able to sustain their way through that. Once again, from the finance world, I mean, I've seen this in the past with a lot of the gun companies. They try to make a splash, but they spend a lot of money, and then they just end up being burned out or have issues. So that's my soapbox speech. Alex,
Yeah, that's it.
how can people
Got it.
find you?
What's that?
How can people find you?
Well, you can either Google affordable optics and rifle reviews. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's fairly self-explanatory. That'll bring you. First option will be my YouTube page. You can check me out. I'm essentially reviewing mostly affordable optics. Some of them, sometimes I go in the less affordable. Sometimes I stay within my, the amount I decided I want to spend around 600 and less. You'll generally see a lot more optics around that price range. Also, if there's enough requests, I'll pick up an optic and I'll do a review. So check out my YouTube page. And thanks, Max, for having me on your channel.
Thank you very much. So I guess in closing, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you found value in this. I hope you found it of interest. So we'll do quite a bit more of it. We really weren't originally planning on having it at 11 o'clock, but schedule-wise, this is kind of like the only thing that worked out for this week. Next week, I think we'll go back to a more reasonable time, such as 9 or 10 o'clock. So once again, thank you everyone for joining. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, share it with your friends. Make sure you check out Alex's channel and subscribe. I'll put a link in the description box. And keep on squatting, and I'll see